What's up, cooks? Welcome to the Car Kitchen. I am the Car Chef, and today we are cooking up everything you need to know about the Promo Pack Volume 2 and Venusaur Drop event. So as you may know, we have the new Venusaur Drop event, and in that drop event, what you do is you go over to solo mode and you battle in the solo missions in order to unlock the new Promo A Volume 2 packs. Every single time you beat it on Expert, there are a couple of levels before the Expert. I would suggest you get through those 3 as quickly as possible. Even if you don't complete all the missions, once you get to Expert, just stay on Expert and grind that out. Every single time you beat Expert, you will get a guaranteed promo pack, whereas in the others, it is only a percentage of the time. Every single time you do unlock a pack, that pack has 1 of 5 promo cards in it, and those cards are the Venusaur, Greninja, Haunter, Jigglypuff, and Onix. The Venusaur, Onix, and Greninja are just variants, so basically just new art of the old cards, whereas the Haunter and Jigglypuff are actually brand new cards, which is really cool because then we can take those new cards and build some new decks or put them in old versions of decks with these new cards and see if they are any better. So what we want to do is we want to talk about today some of the decks that you can build from these promo cards, as well as some of the decks you would want to use in the event to grind through it as quickly and strongly as possible, as well as some other decks that you might want to just play on ladder afterwards, knowing that the certain decks will be played because of these promo cards. And with that being said, let's get into the decks. So the first deck we want to talk about is the Team Rocket deck teched in with Wigglytuff. This deck has been doing pretty decent recently. Weezing and Wigglytuff on their own have also already been a good deck, as well as Weezing and Arbok on their own have been a good deck. Recently, people have been combining these two decks together. Now that we have the new Jigglypuff that has an attack for 1 energy and instantly puts your opponent's Pokemon to sleep, it might just increase this deck's play rate as well as win rate. And so if this is a deck that interests you, I would suggest using this once you unlock the Jigglypuff. The next deck I want to talk about is a Wigglytuff Frostmoth deck. Both of these Pokemon put your opponent's active Pokemon to sleep. And with the new Jigglypuff, I think this can be really strong. You can basically keep your opponent's Pokemon to sleep right from the get-go with your Jigglypuff, as well as then your Frostmoth and your Wigglytuff. And then I'm also going to throw in a copy of Baby Articuno that puts your opponent's active Pokemon not to sleep, but paralyzes them. And so it's this like really cool like special conditions deck where your opponent's active Pokemon is either always asleep or paralyzed, which means they cannot attack or retreat. So while this is happening, you're just chipping in for a ton of damage over time and taking out games in a longer period of time. But that's the whole point of this deck. Let me know if you think this is a cool deck or not in the comments below. So another deck that would be pretty interesting to make is by combining both the Jigglypuff and Haunter into the same deck. Previously in the last promo event, they had a Lapras EX and a Butterfree in the event, and people saw right away that this would be a pretty cool idea to take them both and combine them. And so I would like to see how that goes in this one. And sometimes they probably do this stuff on purpose, and this might make Gengar a little bit better. I actually still think Gengar will be not as that great. I think he only works in one way, and we'll get to that after this. However, I think if you can stall out and keep your opponent's active Pokemon asleep with your Jigglypuff and your Wigglytuff, and then bring in the Gengar in the end so that they can't like Sabrina you or get a late game Misty or something crazy like that, I think this deck could be somewhat viable. Yeah, I think you would have to play more copies of the regular Gengar opposed to the Gengar EX because Wigglytuff takes so much energy requirement, which is 3. You won't really have a lot of time to build up your other one, your other Gengar EX, that is, sorry. with 3 energy as well. So you might actually want to play a multiple copies of the regular Gengar and maybe only 1 copy of the Gengar EX. I'll leave that up for you to decide. And with that being said, let's get into the next deck. So the next deck is my favorite deck. I have a video out on this deck already. I call it Psylocke, and it's a Psyduck Gengar deck. And this is one of those decks where I find this is the only way you can play Gengar, because the only way you can play Gengar is if you have his effect from the beginning of the game to the end of the game. And the only way to do that is by putting in Psyduck. Psyduck's attack, Headache for 1 energy, which is colorless, so you can play it with Psychic. It does 10 damage and also locks your opponent out from playing supporters on the following turn. And so if you can get that lockout from the beginning of the game and then bring in your Gengar in the end and continue that lockdown, then you have a real good chance of controlling the game state and locking your opponent out for the whole game. And now with the new Haunter, it's a little bit stronger. It's a little bit RNG because it's 1 energy for 50 attack, which is really good. However, if you flip tails, it does nothing. And it does have lower HP, so I don't really know if it'll make this deck stronger or not. I do think it's a better Haunter, but you don't ever really find yourself attacking that much or that often with Haunter. So I do think the only way this does become an additional value to the deck is if those one-off times when you don't draw into the Psyduck at the beginning of the game, and you need to be able to put additional ways of putting pressure onto your opponent, and you can do that by attacking in for a lot of damage for 1 energy with your new Haunter promo card. And with that being said, let's get into the next deck. So the last deck I want to talk about from the cards that you can get from the promo packs is a Greninja deck, and it's being called recently, I think it's either being called like the Ninja deck or the Shinobi deck, and the reason for that is because Greninja is a ninja Pokemon and Koga is actually a poison type trainer who is a ninja as well. And so you're combining the Weezing Koga package with Greninja, and this is really cool because basically you get to attack with your Weezing as well as put on poison damage counters and then put on damage counters from your bench onto any of your opponent's Pokemon with Greninja. So you're just like accumulating a ton of damage over time with the poison by attacking and with the Greninja. And so it's kind of really cool. It's also a single prize deck that like prevents your opponent from getting any prizes at all if you get that Weezing loop going. And so if you didn't know about this deck, now you do, and it's a pretty cool deck. So if you try it out, let me know how it goes. And with that being said, I want to get into the decks that you should be using in the solo event to grind through it as quickly and strongly as possible. So who would have known? Fire decks. This is a Venusaur drop event, so therefore all the solo battles in this new event are Venusaur decks, which are grass type. So you want to be able to use the fire type decks, and there's a couple of them out there. The first one being something like Belaine. I would pick that one last over the others, only because sometimes, even though it's a super fast and aggressive deck, if that Venusaur gets online and starts healing up, sometimes you just can't take it out in time. But that deck is really good for being able to take decks out before they get going, so it's a really good option. The next one would just be a standard Charizard Moltres deck. It's super duper strong. That's the one that I use to get through it really quickly. What you can do is you can do the new Moltres Arcanine deck. So people have been taking the Arcanine and putting it in the place of Charizard and really trying to make that Arcanine deck a lot better. And so now what other people have done recently, and it's one of the more successful decks recently for fire types, is you actually combine both of them. You combined the Moltres decks together, and you put Arcanine and Charizard in the same deck. This is really good for like tournament play. I don't know if it would be super duper good for the event. I do think the Charizard Moltres, just them alone, is good enough. And honestly, just put it on auto battle and let it do its thing, because Charizard, once it gets loaded up, it's never going to get knocked out, and it's going to knock out every single Pokemon, including the Venusaur. And with that being said, I have one more deck, and it's the deck that I think you should be using on PvP after you've done all your testing, or even before you've done your testing, and this is why. This deck here is a fighting deck. Do not go into the event with this deck because all the Pokemon that are fighting type are weak to grass. This deck is for ladder after you're done the event, and it has nothing to do with the promo cards of this deck. The reason why you should play this deck on ladder during this event is because a lot of people are going to be testing with Jigglypuff, and it's going to be tested with the Arbok and Weezing a lot, which means all three of those Pokemon in that deck will be weak to fighting. And plus, it's always good to bring a fighting deck to ladder anyways, because you might see a lot of Pikachu who's also weak to fighting. And with that being said, that's all the decks that I wanted to talk about in this video. Let me know what you thought and what you think of the decks. And as always, like, subscribe, and share, and keep cooking.